Coming up on this week's show, how Peacock levels the playing field of Premier League popularity, our opinions about opening weekend of Bundesliga and Serie A coverage, where to go to get top-level Premier League analysis, Roku responds to demands by adding Peacock to streaming devices, plus we have letters from you, the listeners, in our mailbag section. I'm Christopher Harris, aka The Gaffer, joined alongside co-host Kartik Krishnaiyer. Kartik, when we began this podcast almost 4 years ago, I don't think you or I could have anticipated how much of an impact the majority of our soccer viewing is having. I mean, when you think about it, right? Bundesliga, every game on streaming. The Premier League, almost 50% of games are on streaming, including now a lot of the big matches. Serie A, what's like 95% of the games are on streaming. Major League Soccer, I mean, really, I've been doing the schedules for the last few weeks, and almost every game is on ESPN Plus, unless you get it on your local TV station. But for me, that doesn't have a local MLS team, almost every game is on ESPN Plus. And you go down the list, I mean, there's very little soccer that's on mainstream television, so much so that our weekly column about TV ratings is really dominated and monopolized, really, not in a bad way, but by Univision and Tuduene. I mean, they're the ones that are covering a ton of soccer on television, and then other than that, Fox is out of the game. CBS, Champions League, Europa League, every game on streaming, and yes, now and again you'll have a game on television. It's crazy.
Yeah, and in fact, I should mention that there's been some significant cost cutting at 2DNA and Univision, which you might reflect if you watch that network regularly, those networks regularly, you might notice that. So it's like everything is very different. Is there any network that covers soccer the same way now than they did in 2016 when we started this?
beIN Sports.
Yeah, okay.
Right? That's the only one, right?
Yeah. Okay, so I thought it was nobody, but that's a good shout for beIN, and that's a credit to them.
And also Goal TV. I mean, so it's kind of two networks that really don't change things much. They stick to their game plan, and but then again, beIN Sports is not really on television that much. It's not on your Comcast, it's not on your DirecTV. So most people that are watching beIN Sports, it's through streaming. Same with Goal TV. Goal TV, it's really difficult to find on your local cable or satellite company. It's mostly through streaming, through Fanatis or Fubo, etc. So, I mean, that's the name of the game right now, Kartik. And we've had, this past 2 weeks, so much opinions on social media and the comment section on the website, worldsoccertalk.com. Just people saying, like, I hate it. Enough's enough. Like, what happened to soccer on television? Well, to me, practically soccer is almost extinct on television. It's, 90%? Especially last weekend, 90% of the games on our weekly column about the top 5 games to watch on soccer on TV this weekend, 4 of the 5 were on streaming. There was only one game that was on television. Now this past weekend was... and anomaly, it's not going to be that way with the Premier League on NBCSN every single week. This weekend, almost all the games are going to be on television. But I can tell you, I can predict the future and foretell. Not much of a prediction here, but you're going to see more and more games on Peacock. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and you speak of beIN. I had forgotten how hard it was to actually get beIN Extra. I mean, it's free, but you have to go through some hoops because Nisa this week was on beIN Extra. So I thought, just fire up beIN and watch it, and it wasn't that way, right? So, your commitment as a fan is tested, but I think the executives know that soccer fans are more willing. Well, at least they thought we're more willing to go jump through these hoops and pay extra for it. But I've really, Chris, been taken aback, and I know people who follow me on Twitter have seen this. back and forth every day, taken aback by the resistance and anger about Peacock. This anger wasn't there when NBC Sports Gold debuted a few years ago. It hasn't really been there for the Serie A and Bundesliga going behind ESPN Plus or the Championship. Think about it. The Championship used to have 2 matches a week probably on average on BN.
Right.
Yeah, on TV. And now none. But there's something about ESPN Plus where people tolerate it a little better. In fact, there are Bundesliga fans who think this is the greatest thing ever. They're seeing more games, even though there'll be far fewer games on television this year than last season when it was on Fox.
Yeah, this one's a little bit different. And when I say this one, of course, it's Peacock. It's different because it's not really a sports streaming service. It's really more of it's almost more of a Netflix. I mean, Peacock is like Netflix. You got movies, you got some original programming. You've got a huge catalog of over 13,000 programs that are available through there. And then you've got sports. But sports part of it is kind of on the side. Yes, they have golf and they have soccer, and I'm sure they're going to have more in the future. ESPN is a little bit different. But then again, too, you look at the price point. Peacock's cheaper than ESPN Plus. ESPN Plus, yes, has a ton of programming for sports and soccer, etc. Documentaries, 30 for 30s, etc. I think part of it, the resistance, I was surprised by it too. There's many different factors. Part of it, though, too, Kartik, I think, is that part of it is it's Comcast. Part of it feels like, and also the other part of it is here's another streaming service on top of what people were already paying for in the past. So it's if Peacock was early to the game, maybe there'd have been less resistance. But with it being so late in the scheme of things, as far as your CBS All Accesses and ESPN Pluses and those types of streaming services, Peacock is late. But yeah, I was surprised by the resistance too. There are reasons for the resistance in terms of not being available on Roku. Okay, well that's been resolved. It's now on Roku, which makes a big difference. It's the most popular streaming service, streaming device out there to watch programming, whether you've cut the cord or not. But Roku's a big difference. Some of the functionality that people got in NBC Sports Gold is not available in Peacock. But with that, I would say to have some patience and to be optimistic. Peacock is brand new, and hopefully in a short amount of time, some of the features that people were used to on NBC Sports Gold will be in Peacock. But overall, this past weekend, Kartik, I watched more Peacock than I did ESPN Plus. I watched a ton of Premier League programming, a ton of games, some shows and different things. And yes, I love ESPN Plus too. But to me, so far, I'm trying to remain positive and optimistic that Peacock is going to get better, and I'm pretty confident it will.
So I guess part of the discussion here is, one, on Peacock, you can stream, but you really can't watch on demand. You can't pause. I had numerous problems when I switched because ESPN Plus is showing Serie A matches or Bundesliga matches that I want to watch at the same time they're matches on Peacock. I can get out of the ESPN app on my Apple TV, kind of leave it running, switch to Peacock, and then go back to ESPN and the game is still running. Now, when I leave Peacock, I leave the game, and I have to fire it back up again. When I go back to Peacock, it has to reload, and it picks up wherever the game is. Now, and actually on ESPN Plus, I do have the option of pausing the Serie A or Bundesliga match, or actually championship match. Sure, I watched Coventry and QPR on ESPN Plus this weekend. You could pause that. There's just more functionality in it, and I think that's a great point you make. NBC Sports Gold had some of that functionality that we don't have in Peacock. And the other thing is, I think a lot of people subscribe to ESPN Plus saying, I got to subscribe now that I have to watch the Bundesliga or Serie A on there. But then there's all this other sports programming that they probably want anyway. Whereas with Peacock, you're right. It's like a Netflix. So you get the Premier League, you do get some golf, and that's it. Otherwise, it's movies and documentaries, which may not interest a lot of these people. So that might be the reason. But I do trust it will get better, although I'm surprised NBC Universal has brought something to market and promoted it so widely. which was not fully functional in the way other streaming services are. So that's something that I think we're going to have to continue to discuss. I do agree with you, Chris. I trust that they will work out these kinks. But for a company of Universal size, NBC Universal and Comcast size, and experience in the media space, they're always competing with Disney, right? So Disney Plus beat them to market. ESPN Plus beat them to market. I'm really kind of surprised by some of these issues.
Yeah, part of it is, I think, I mean, my guess is, based on some of the discussions I have had, is that the Premier League was almost an afterthought for Peacock. A year ago, when NBC internally are planning on Peacock, they're developing it, trying to figure out what programming to put on there. I'm not so sure that the Premier League was even part of that picture. And I think a year ago, if I remember correctly, I asked NBC Sports on the sports side, the PR side, and said, hey, talk to me about Peacock. Is there any chance the Premier League could be on there? And I think the response I got was, we're not sure. And that's the feeling I get, though, too, is that Peacock was developed in a way to think of it as more of a Netflix where you can watch watch programs on demand. You can watch movies, TV shows, and other types of programming. It wasn't essentially meant for live sports. Now that's been added on, and I think NBC Sports has to catch up, or Peacock has to catch up and actually add those enhancements, those features that we as live sports fans crave, need, want. I mean, those are the things that will be added, I believe, in the near future. And I think once, if you add pause, being able to pause a game and have on demand, those two things by itself would make a big difference. I think those two things would satisfy a lot of people. And again, too, a lot of people have commented to me and said, like, well, Fubo has this, and Hulu Plus Live TV has this functionality. And I'm like, it's not an apples to apples comparison. Fubo TV is $55 a month. YouTube TV is $65 a month. The types of functionality that those streaming services have, which have been in business for a long, long time, is not the same as Peacock, which is $4.99 a month. For a lot of people, it's free. Maybe it'll get there eventually, but anyway, that's kind of my take on it. Is that I would just urge patience, urge people to kind of just not go. There's people out there saying, "Okay, I'm going to boycott Peacock." I think that's taking it too far. But so far, from what I've seen from this past weekend, in terms of the matches, and the big thing for me, Kartik, has been the Premier League TV, channel, the actual channel. That's yes, it's live. It's not available on demand. Maybe in the future it will be. But I've watched that plus the games has been kind of my last week for the most part. Lots of great documentaries. I watched a great documentary about Robin van Persie from Arsenal, just talking about his memorable goals he scored for the Gunners. Also, your favourite, Don Hutchinson, is in a lot of the tactical analysis shows that they have. They have one show called Fan Zone, where you have live interviews with soccer fans from around the world. So you had fans from Tanzania, Egypt, Asia, I think Columbus, around the world, and they ask their questions or they share their opinions about the Premier League matches they just saw, or players, etc. And then you have Don Hutchinson live on live television, discussing that and asking questions and answering, sharing some of his analysis. And I think for me personally, yes, I had an NBC Sports Gold subscription in the past, and I used to watch now and again the Premier League Today show when I remembered it was on. But I'm watching more now on Roku of the Premier League TV channel, which is from Premier League Productions, than I did when I had NBC Sports Gold. And for me, just because it's a constant stream, it's easier to have on in the background, and it's really good. Really, really high-level analysis. And actually, Kartik, just add one more thing. I think that's the part that's missing from NBC Sports' analysis of the Premier League, with the Tim Howards, the two Robbies, and Rebecca Lowe, and Arlo White. And we've talked about how that's been relatively comfortable, relatively average from them, is that plus the Premier League TV channel really accentuates that Premier League experience. I'm getting more from the Premier League TV channel than I'm getting from NBC Sports in terms of their analysis, but the two of them together is a good fit. It's well-rounded.
Yeah, I watched that same Don Hutchison show, the Fan Zone show. I got more analysis from the fans on that show, the guys from Australia, and the one you mentioned, the one from Columbus. There was one or two from India, but then I do on NBC shows. I'm sorry, it's like I was getting a lot because they were also talking to fans of non-Big Six teams. That was another part of it, which was important for me. So yeah, I watched that show. I enjoyed that, and the Peacock can complement the NBC coverage. Although I have to say, and you had reported last week about Peacock being the deeper dive, having the deeper dive analysis studio shows. The Monday studio show, which was actually hosted by Ahmed Fareed, not by Rebecca Lowe, was a little deeper in terms of it was all exclusively on Peacock, right? There was no NBCSN component at all. Was I think a little deeper dive. It wasn't great, but it was better than the NBCSN shows. They got a little more into tactics. They got a little more into analysis. They got a little more into tracking certain player movements. So, maybe they just feel like that's not suitable for television or for terrestrial TV anymore for whatever reason.
I noticed that too because I was watching it more closely than I usually do. NBCSN's coverage, NBCSN's coverage on Peacock, trying to see, because they have more time, what are they doing with that time? And it's early days. I mean, it's early days for Tim Howard, but it's also early days for these productions the studio productions having more time. I was a little bit disappointed too with the level of analysis. With that time that they had, the extra time, it just didn't go as deeper as I thought they would. Maybe that'll improve over time. Also, maybe that'll improve with the chemistry because Tim Howard was on all weekend, the first 2 weekends. He's been on there quite a bit. But yeah, I was disappointed. But again, maybe when Robbie Earle comes back and there's a little bit of, them working together a little bit more, it'll be better. But a lot of room for improvement there as far as what they could be doing. But yeah, overall, and actually for a lot of listeners too, are probably screaming at me right now saying, okay, yeah, Peacock's great. It's on Roku, finally, thank gosh. But what about Amazon Fire TV? And so last weekend before Roku was official with Peacock, I watched most of the games through Chromecast. So I was able to use Chromecast in my Google Chrome browser and then cast that to my big TV set and then watch the games on there. Monday, Roku announced that they're now have Peacock. So I've been watching it on Roku. But I think yesterday I went ahead and said, okay, Amazon Fire TV, I have that on a different television. Let me go ahead and add the Peacock to there. And it is possible. So even though it's not official, you can go ahead and sideload it. So you have to basically install the app onto the Amazon Fire TV, which is essentially an Android box or a system that's running Android. So I'll have the article and I'll go through step by step for anyone who has an Amazon Fire TV stick or Amazon Fire TV that wants to have Peacock on there. It's possible and it works flawlessly. It's really, really, once you've done it, it makes a big difference. So anyway, check out worldsoccertalk.com on the homepage and I'll have a step-by-step article there. Now, Kartik, yes, Peacock, we enjoy the games. Before we go into that, we've spent a good amount of time already on the Premier League. What about the Bundesliga? Just one thing from me on the Bundesliga, I was so happy to see fans in the stadium. If anyone who watched the games on Saturday and Sunday, yes, it's a small percentage, but to actually see fans in seats or standing, a certain percentage in each of the different stadiums, other than the Bayern one, that was great. Wonderful to see. That gave me some hope that, yes, things are going to take a while, but that things will start to get back to normal soon.
Yeah, so the Bundesliga coverage on ESPN was excellent this weekend. I enjoyed the preview show that they aired on ESPN2 on Thursday, which had not been promoted. Now, I knew they were going to do an hour-long ESPN FC Bundesliga preview show, but I did not know it was going to be on ESPN2, and my DVR picked it up. And so I watched it the next morning on Friday morning. Dan Thomas hosted it with the usual cast of characters and a couple of actual guests who knew the Bundesliga in and out. Derek Ray was on it, as you would expect, so it was outstanding. And then the studio show Friday, I know you watched this, Chris, also, with hosted by Kay Murray and Taylor Twellman contributing, and obviously Taylor Twellman being the co-commentator for Bundesliga matches this season, and pairing with Derek Ray on the broadcast. The only thing I didn't like about it was that they got out after the game really quickly, right? It seemed kind of rushed. Kay's bit, the 5 to 7 minutes at the end, but the 30-minute lead-in to the game was fantastic, really well done. I got more from it than I get from NBC pregame shows now for the Premier League, and I thought the match coverage was excellent. Derek Ray, as always, is at the top of his game. Particularly, Derek Ray is one of the best commentators in English language in general, but particularly with the Bundesliga. It seems to be the league he has the greatest comfort with.
Yeah. I think if Derek Ray was reborn, he'd be born as a German. I mean, he in terms of the culture, the language, the teams, the history, he's almost more German than he is Scottish, which is fantastic. I mean, here's somebody who is very passionate about German soccer and the German culture and the way that they do things, and it comes through on the broadcast very authentically. I mean, this is somebody that also is well versed in, of course, I mean, practically at any of the major soccer leagues from around the world, and is really a scholar of the game. We're so fortunate to have him. I mean, we're so fortunate to have Derek Ray doing the broadcast. So he's going to do the any games that appear on ESPN or ESPN2 for the Bundesliga this season, which are supposed to be 3 more for the rest of the season, maybe a few more if things go well. He will do those as the lead commentator. So he's the Bundesliga lead commentator for ESPN. And then otherwise, he will do the world feed now and again. So hopefully we'll get to hear him quite often from on ESPN Plus. But yeah, the game itself, gosh, I mean, it's just a shame that Schalke is just so poor. I mean, I can't remember seeing a team that poor in a top-level game against an opponent. I mean, yes, Bayern's one of the best teams, if not the best team in the world right now, but Schalke was absolutely abysmal. I didn't get to watch as much Bundesliga over the weekend as I would like, mostly because I was watching the Premier League, but I did watch on ESPN Plus, the Bundesliga highlight show of Match Day 1, and it was like 60 minutes of really good coverage of all the games, some interviews now and again, and some of the backstory, well produced, and it looked like I missed a really good weekend of some great games there, Kartik.
Yeah, the Dortmund Mönchengladbach match was my favorite match of the week. So I do this every season. People tease me about it because they know it's coming. And Bayern did win 8-0. I accept that. But I do think Dortmund's 3-0 win over Mönchengladbach, a fellow top 4 team, was more impressive than the 8-0. And so I'm deluding myself into believing Dortmund can win the title because I do this every season. Just play along with me, Chris.
Okay.
But they were fantastic. The match was great. Bellingham and Gio Reyna, both 17-year-olds. I think Jude Bellingham has, and you and I both watched him in the championship last year, I think he has the potential to be one of the best players in the world. And I'm not kidding. That's not hyperbole. And he showed it right away, first match in the Bundesliga. And then Haaland and Jadon Sancho also had great games. It was really fun to watch. I just think Dortmund's going to be fun this year. Whether they win the league or not, they're going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the post-match interview with Erling Haaland calling Gio Reyna the American dream. And just, you could tell that these are players, young players that love playing the sport, playing attacking football. Such a fun team to watch. And I hope they go for it. I mean, whether it's Dortmund or whether it's one of the other German teams, I hope that they really push Bayern to the limit and really make it a fun season. So far, so good. I mean, opening weekend, as far as what ESPN Plus and ESPN did for the Bundesliga, was all-out coverage on social media, on television, for the opening game, and of course on ESPN Plus.
And I also have to mention this, Chris. Sorry. Non-soccer fans and casual soccer fans who are into American sports were complaining to me they were getting all these push alerts from ESPN about the Bundesliga. I loved hearing that. I was so happy to hear that. So that, and I guess it's the first time they've done it for soccer, other than maybe in the World Cup or Euro. So props to ESPN for that. They're really going all in, at least in promotion of the Bundesliga. Now, why they didn't do that for Serie A when they got the rights, maybe Serie A fans could ask that question. But well done.
Yeah, and I think they've learned a lot from Serie A as far as how to market a league and how to position it, how to get the word out there. So I think part of it is some learning lessons that they got from the Serie A coverage that they're now putting into the Bundesliga. I think it's a great fit. It's a great fit for ESPN Plus. Every single game, and of course too. We announced this week that they will have one game a week from the second division of the Bundesliga. And over time, ESPN has indicated that will probably increase from one to possibly two. We just don't know when that's going to happen. Part of it is that the feed that ESPN Plus and World Broadcasters get from the second division of the German league has no audio, so has no commentator. And it has basically no production put into it. So whoever takes that feed and then puts that out there has to then go ahead and put a score bug on and add a commentator. And as we saw with Fox in the past, when it was on Fox Soccer Match Pass, they just went ahead and just basically televised it as is without adding a score bug, without adding a commentator. But I think part of it is ESPN and really their commitment levels and production levels. They feel bad, I think, in putting out a product that doesn't have a commentator and doesn't have a score bug on it. So that's the reason why we get one game a week for now, hopefully more in the future. Kartik, anything else before we move on that you saw from this past week that's worth mentioning?
Not really. I mean, I think the thing to me that was really overwhelming was just as we talked about at the top of the show, the amount of conversation about Peacock, and it continued after into Tuesday and Wednesday was actually, to me, kind of overshadowed all of the games, all of the football. I wasn't expecting this level of vitriol or passion. The people who are defending Peacock are, I guess, equally passionate.
Yeah, and I think it'll get better. I think it's one of those things that, I mean, the Roku issue was a massive issue. That's been resolved. Like I said, Amazon Fire TV, there's a good workaround that's going to give you an experience just like the regular Amazon Fire TV Peacock app. And then it's just there's other things too. There's replays. But even the replays of games. So initially, NBC Sports, when they announced Peacock, and I talked to them about the replays, when would they be available. And the policy from the Premier League is that 9 p.m. Eastern time that night is by the time that all of the replays will be available. What we're seeing so far is if a game is exclusive to Peacock, so this Monday's Liverpool against Arsenal game is going to be live on Peacock, within about 2 hours after the game has ended, it's available on replay. So depending on the time of the day, if you have a game that kicks off early in the morning, say it's a 7:30 Eastern time game and it's a 4:30 Eastern in the morning, 4:30 Pacific time in the morning, and that's on Peacock exclusively, then usually within a couple of hours it'll be on Peacock. So that's a big plus in terms of people who may be living on the West Coast or living in Hawaii that want to watch these games but don't want to wake up, the crack of dawn. And yeah, so it's better than what was first reported. And again, too, I think we just need to kind of go along with it. I mean, for me, it's great. I still get to watch these games. The price point is cheap. And you can sign up for an annual plan if you want to, which is, I think, like $50. But it's cheaper than NBC Sports Gold, and you get a whole bunch of other coverage on there that you didn't get with NBC Sports Gold. All right, Kartik, as far as the TV streaming news, we're going to skip that this week because we've covered the Roku news with Peacock now being available, and we'll save some of the... And we've also talked a lot about streaming and the media companies and them getting involved in the name of the game when it comes to soccer these days. So let's move on to TV ratings. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't have a lot of those because most of the games, especially last weekend, were on streaming. But I'll have you kick it off with the big one.
Yeah, the big news, which has got people excited all over Twitter, 495,000 for the North Carolina Courage Orlando Pride match on CBS, which was on Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. It's the third successive week that an NWSL game has been on Saturday afternoon. They have a fourth successive week this week coming up Saturday the 26th, and then they take a few weeks off before showing another match. But it looks like the repetition of showing all these NWSL games over the air is really helping the league and helping CBS. These are better numbers than, quite honestly, we've seen from MLS games in similar time slots. So that's sure. a big feather in the cap of NWSL and CBS.
Yeah, definitely. So far, so good there from both NWSL and CBS. Now, in terms of the Bundesliga game that we mentioned that was on Friday on ESPN, which was also on ESPN Deportes and also on ESPN Plus, that one on ESPN, the English language channel on television, 204,000 viewers tuned in for that one, which is much greater than what Fox was getting. When Fox would have a game on FS1, usually on a Friday game, usually that number would be less than 100,000. For a Bayern game, that might be a little bit more than 100,000. So based on this number, it looks like ESPN doubled that, and that's a very optimistic, very positive start. From what I'm hearing too is that the ESPN Plus streaming numbers from the Bundesliga from last season, while they won't be made available to the public, were very, very positive. So a lot of positive signs there from ESPN about the Bundesliga. Now, with the Premier League, there was no games on NBC last weekend, NBC over the air, but there were two games on television. And Arsenal against West Ham on NBCSN on Saturday, and that one had almost 500,000 people, and that was 494,000 viewers for that. The Leicester-Burnley game on the Sunday morning, actually Sunday afternoon, I apologize, was 210,000 viewers for that. So what this does, though, Kartik, because we don't get as long as Peacock plays an active role in the Premier League as far as showing most of the big games, such as the Chelsea-Liverpool game from last weekend that we won't know what the number is, such as this Monday's Liverpool against Arsenal game, which is Peacock exclusive. I think the following week is Aston Villa against Liverpool, and it looks like that's going to be on Peacock too. What it really points or paints a picture, Kartik, to me is that in some ways it almost levels the playing field with the Premier League because, yes, the Premier League is the most popular English language soccer league in the United States, but part of that was the accessibility. Part of that was games being on NBCSN like clockwork, being on NBC on a Saturday afternoon like clockwork. That clockwork is broken. That clockwork is no more. Going into the future, other than this weekend, we don't know when games are going to be on anymore. We know when the games will be on, but we don't know if it'll be Peacock or NBCSN or USA or NBC. So I think in some ways that's going to level the playing field as far as the viewing numbers because we're only going to get isolated numbers for the Premier League. And as you see here with the Arsenal-West Ham game, 494,000 viewers for NBCSN, which is a good number. It's a really good number. They're not going to be as big as we used to saw in the past, unless it's Leeds United against Liverpool on NBC opening weekend, unless we have more games on the over-the-air channel. But otherwise, if Peacock takes an active role, I think it diminishes the popularity or the perceived popularity of the Premier League in the United States. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree in principle if we if the reliability, the clockwork of knowing what network and when games are on changes. Now, I'm not convinced it's going to change, Chris. We are in a situation where the start times of matches are being staggered because of COVID. Now, COVID's not going away in the UK. Obviously, the Boris-Johnson government just imposed new restrictions, which is also going to change the start times of some matches, actually, beginning next weekend. But once we're back to the usual 12:30, 3 o'clock, 5:30 on Saturdays, and then the usual thing on Sundays, I think there will probably be an SN or NBC game in just about every time slot. That's my prediction. That I think there's going to be some return to normalcy at some point with the television, with how NBC and again there'll be multiple games at some of those kickoff times, so those other games will be on Peacock. But I don't think that we're going to see permanently full-on time slots move to Peacock. Now, I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, then absolutely, you're right. Then the playing field between the Bundesliga and Premier League in particular has shifted, because I also have to say I haven't put that much stock into American players driving fandom, but there seems to be some residual effect of the Bundesliga having so many American guys come through the league, even if they've left now, like Pulisic and McKinney, that has interested American fans, and the Fox issue was the issue holding the league back. Now that it's more accessible in reality on between ESPN Plus and ESPN, and they're pushing it, right? Like I said, they're non-soccer fans or casual soccer fans who are like, oh my gosh, they're sending me as much stuff about this Bundesliga as they do about college football, and getting annoyed. That completely changes the trajectory of things potentially. So I'd wait till after COVID. But if you're right, Chris, and there's going to be more and more games on Peacock, even in the time slots we're accustomed to having SN games, then yeah, I think the dynamics are going to shift in the next few seasons between those two leagues in the U.S.
I think with the Bundesliga, though, too, if you look at the Twitter sphere, you would think that the Bundesliga was the number one league in the United States on television.
Yeah.
I mean, so many of the people you follow and I follow, and we interact with, are big Bundesliga fans, and understandably so. It's a fantastic league. It's well organized. It's attacking. It's well produced. There's very little negatives about the Bundesliga. The only negative is the very stubbornness in terms of kickoff times. Even now during COVID, I mean, it's still stuck in the same time zone, the kickoff times. But the thing is, though, with the Premier League, is that how much of an impact is Peacock going to have on numbers? Now, NBC can look at Peacock and see instantly how many people are watching these games. Is it much greater? Is it much less? It's bound to be less. But the issue I foresee is that that water cooler conversation, where it's Monday morning, Kartik goes into the office and has a cup of coffee and is talking to those friends that are into soccer. And you say to them, like, oh my gosh, did you see that Chelsea-Liverpool game? But then again, the other people might say, like, no, I don't have Peacock. Man, you should have gotten it because it was such a good game and blah, blah, blah.
No.
That's the issue I see.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, because I don't watch the NFL, I can't stand the NFL, right? I deliberately try and avoid it. That the water cooler talk on Monday morning, it was always easy for me to divert and talk about the Premier League, because inevitably people have watched the Premier League game at the 11:30 start time on NBCSN, or 11 o'clock prior to this most recent TV contract. So if that's gone, that changes the dynamic in offices and break rooms and in just kind of social settings around the country. So that's a very, very good point.
Yeah, and that's why I say that the perception of the Premier League as far as the popularity could be diminished. Maybe it's by a little, maybe it's not, maybe it's by a lot. And that's the thing though too, we won't know, because NBC will probably not release those numbers. Peacock will probably, the only numbers that they will release probably are the number of subscribers. Right now it's at 15 million. Okay, in 6 months from now, will it be 20 million? Well, that doesn't tell us anything about how many people actually came to Peacock because of the Premier League. But yeah, hopefully after COVID, whenever that'll be at this point, it'll give us a better indication. But my thinking is, though, Kartik, is that we're going to see more and more games move to Peacock, especially next season. Next season, who knows? Next season, it could be that almost every game is going to be on Peacock, especially if it helps the Peacock numbers. This season, they've said 175 games. That's it. They're not going to change that. But of those 175, how many of the big games are going to be on Peacock? So we're in transition.
Next season is, I just want to throw out there, Chris, next season's the last season of NBC's contract.
Yeah. And by that time that starts, it's possible that we could know who the new broadcaster is going to be for the next 6 years. Yeah. And if it's not NBC Sports, they might say, okay, hey, the last season of the Premier League, 100% on Peacock. We're just going to go ahead and cash it in, get as much money as we can, and we're not going to have it for the future after that. So let's go for it. Whew. I can't wait for that one, Kartik, to see what happens with the next discussions with the rights and the bidding. All right, moving on to listener mailbag. First up is Martin in Colorado. You'll like this one, Kartik. I bought ESPN Plus solely to watch the Bundesliga, but was never a Fox Soccer Plus subscriber because I did not feel their price point matched the product they delivered. The ESPN Plus app, which I view via the Amazon Fire Stick with an Ethernet adapter, so no lag time or no buffering, makes it easy for me to watch any game I want, plus replays and the side programming like the Bundesliga archive and season previews, as well as more attention from the ESPN FC show that gives the Bundesliga a superior platform to last year. Yes, maybe fewer people watch the games now, but I am sure more people will become or stay Bundesliga fans because the quality and reliability that ESPN delivers that Fox never did. Aside from Ian Joy, who did more advertising for Bundesliga games than Fox ever did. So overall, I'm keeping this app for as long as the Bundesliga is on ESPN Plus. It gets an A+ rating from me. Wow. So
yeah, that's outstanding.
Yeah. And I think the off the top of my head, I think the deal with the Bundesliga 6 years. Exactly. It's like an NBC deal. I mean, 6 years from now, the whole world could be very, very different. So 6 years is a long time to go ahead and establish a really good relationship and build on that. So 6 years from now, the Bundesliga could be bigger than some of these other leagues that are competing against it.
Yeah, I think, again, I hate to keep bringing this up every week, it seems like, but the beIN issue is going to have to be resolved for La Liga, or they're going to be, now that the Bundesliga is getting this level of attention, this level of promotion in the U.S., and really this level of accolade. You talk about Twitter, if you're in kind of the U.S. soccer Twitter sphere, you'd think the Bundesliga was the biggest league in the world, honestly. Even the people who only talk about MLS, if they talk about one league in Europe, it's the Bundesliga, right? Mm-hmm. So I think La Liga is really they got to be looking at this thing, and they got to find a way out in the U.S. unless it's just not that important to them. Because I think I saw a story recently that their rights fee, whatever they're getting from beIN, is kind of comparable to what the Premier League is getting from NBC, which I found hard to believe, but I think I saw that somewhere.
Yeah, right now La Liga is getting left behind in the dust. I mean, the actual rights fee, which I haven't seen it, but if you have seen it, can't send it over. But the rights fee was a global one. So beIN Sports did a global deal. So it would be hard to kind of say, okay, what portion of that was the United States? But I love La Liga. But to me, La Liga has fallen down in the pecking order. Today, as we're recording this podcast, we're recording it on Wednesday night, a little bit earlier than what we anticipate usually. But Friday's game, 2 days from now, has been moved. So you got a game featuring Athletic Bilbao that's been moved from Friday to Sunday within 2 days of the game being played. There's a lot of just really messy scheduling, not a lot of interest in the La Liga this season. But a lot of interest in the Bundesliga. It seems to be a lot more exciting to me as a neutral. But I'm sure some other people probably agree with that too. Next up is Jeff Moser. Jeff says, I've been following the site for over a year and for the last 6 months have been listening to the weekly podcast. Although I did not grow up with or play soccer, I'm in my 40s. I'm a soccer fan of 3 years and have really fallen for the sport. Thank you, Kartik, and the World Soccer Talk crew for what you do on both the site and the podcast is very helpful, including for newbies to the sport like me. Hey, that's perfect, Kartik, because I mean, a lot of it too is that, yes, we talk to the hardcore. And actually, if you listen to this podcast and you're a newbie, and you're right with us in terms of what we're talking about, that's a huge accomplishment because we do go deep into the hardcore of soccer. So that's great to see. I mean, it's somebody that like Jeff, who's new to the sport, who's really fallen for it. For me, it really is. It is my life. I mean, of course, I have my family, but for me, it's 7 days a week. It's full on. Whether I'm watching soccer with my kids, it's watching them play, or watching it on television, or writing about it, or updating schedules about it. And as for you, Kartik, too, same thing too. It is really, it's our lives. It's our passion, and hopefully that comes through on this podcast.
Yeah. So thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate that.
Next up is JP. Seeing all the comments on Peacock makes me glad I'm not a diehard Premier League fan. Cannot imagine watching Serie A without the ability to rewind to anything I missed on ESPN+. Even beIN Sports Connect has that functionality, and we know that's not exactly the gold standard for streaming. I get your point that people should be expected to pay for soccer coverage, but fans of Premier League were once given everything for free, provided you had NBCSN, and are now slowly rolling back the access. Can see how that would upset people. At the same time, they need multiple services to follow the league. It's like the ESPN model for Serie A on steroids. They are going to lose the casual fans that they once gained from making the matches ubiquitous on NBC platforms. If they lose the NHL after next season, which is very possible, and have more Premier League behind a paywall, then NBCSN becomes just as useless as CBS Sports Network before they had the Champions League and Europa League, and would be very interesting how Comcast could justify carrying the channel but not be in sports without obviously violating antitrust regulations. Now, this week in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article about how within Comcast and within NBC Universal, there's such a focus on Peacock. It's all about Peacock. Everything's about Peacock. That they've started looking at some of the TV channels and saying, like, hey, do we really need to have some of these TV channels? Like, I can't even remember some of the names of them, which I always forget. But
Bravo and channels like that, maybe.
Yeah, but NBCSN could be part of that too. I mean, imagine if that channel, if NBCSN lost the Premier League rights in the next deal, what would be on NBCSN? And like JP mentioned, if they lost the NHL, what would be on that channel? I mean, worth watching, other than the Olympics, of course, but that's every 4 years. What is there left? I mean, there's rugby.
If they do lose the NHL, I think they probably fold NBCSN. I don't think they keep it going.
It's possible because they don't have a lot of soccer rights. I mean, it's a Premier League or nothing. Practically. Which reminds me a little bit of Fox Soccer Channel towards the end of their stay, where the Premier League was number one, but they didn't have a lot of other rights. I mean, I think they'd lost a lot of the other rights that they did have. The Premier League was such a focus. But Tim Keane says, I get Peacock as part of my Comcast cable service, so I'm not overly concerned about the availability of matches. I live on the West Coast, so the complaint I have is that the early games, coverage begins at 4 a.m. Eastern Pacific time, is essentially unavailable. I used to be able to record them on a DVR and begin watching at a more reasonable time. The full match replay is not available until later in the day when we all know the score, which tends to make it less than exciting. So that's part of it too. I mean, a lot of the criticism or a lot of the feedback and comments we've gotten over the past week has been that Peacock doesn't have a DVR and they suck. But the reality is, Kartik, is that these days, most streaming services don't have a DVR. ESPN doesn't have a DVR. Peacock obviously doesn't. And I don't think CBS All Access has it. Most of it is now either it's live programming or on demand. And you'd go into, say, BR Live as another example. If you missed a game, you could go ahead, maybe a couple of hours after the game has ended, you could go into your on-demand section. Same thing with Fanatics too, and watch that game on demand. So hopefully, like I mentioned too about the replays, hopefully some of those early morning games are going to be available sooner than we first reported. If it's on Peacock, for whatever reason, if it's on Peacock exclusively, they do get added to the replay section a lot faster. If you check out our YouTube channel, just Google or look on YouTube and look for World Soccer Talk. We've got a demo that shows you where to find the replays on Peacock and goes into more details. But hopefully that will help things. But yes, I know it's not perfect. But if it is on television, if it's a 7:30 Eastern time, 4:30 Pacific time game on a Saturday, and it's on television, there are some streaming services that do have DVRs, but they're usually the most expensive ones, such as Fubo TV or YouTube TV. Joe Cromwell says that last week's episode was one of my favorites. I also saw a lot of people complaining about Peacock. I really like it. The monthly purchases are always easy for me. I have a family. When I see one get charged, I really evaluate how much I've watched and if I'm wasting my money. I love the Two Robbies podcast. I wish it was longer. I'm going to miss Kyle Martino. He could say some daring things, but do it like a gentleman and not come off wacky or hot takey like the guy on Fox does. I'm really excited to see what ESPN does with the Bundesliga. Fox didn't give it what it deserved. The app always worked well for me. Always a great picture, but I agree. Finding a game on the app is sort of all over the place on ESPN+. The second season of Take Us Home, Leeds United, has dropped this morning on Amazon Prime, but only 2 episodes so far. Did they do that with the first season, or was it only too long? So I think they're doing what they did with the Tottenham Hotspur One All or Nothing, where they're releasing in bits and pieces. So I think 3 episodes in the beginning, and then weekly thereafter, I think it is, or you mean, so it's not all in one where you can just binge them all. I have started watching season 2 of the Take Us Home Leeds United, and even though it probably has a lot of the same criticisms I had about the Spurs one, where it is very positive, just Marcelo Bielsa just infatuates me, intrigues me. Probably intrigues is a better word. Intrigues me so much that I'm hanging on to those episodes to try to get into the mind of Bielsa, to try to see how he operates. And that documentary series does do a lot of that. I mean, you get to know the Leeds players too, which is great, as well as the club and the fans. But so far, season 2, I'm as hooked as I was on season 1. And that's out on Amazon Prime, if you get that. All right, Kartik. So we want you to have your say, as well as the listeners, and anyone who has any questions, any feedback, any observations, any opinions, and let us know anything about the world of soccer media. Tell us, and we'd love to read that out on air. You can always reach us via email through web at worldsoccertalk.com, as well as facebook.com/worldsoccertalk, and on Twitter at worldsoccertalk. Plus, of course, you can always post your comments on worldsoccertalk.com. As far as where to find the podcast, this week we've got some big news, and that is that Amazon Music now has a new feature where they have podcasts. So if you go to Amazon Music, you can find the World Soccer Talk podcast there, and you can subscribe to that for free, as well as finding it, of course, on Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, YouTube, Overcast, worldsoccertalk.com, etc. All right, Kartik, so if listeners want to catch up with you and find out the latest information about whether it's about hurricanes, elections, Bielsa, Man City, etc. Where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at KKFLA737. I guess I offended a lot of Barcelona fans by saying that I thought Serginho Dest would be better off going to Bayern Munich than Barcelona. Caused a Twitter war over this. I was told by some people Barcelona is a better club and is a better team right now than Bayern Munich, which and I found quite kind of remarkable given the last time those two teams played, which was very recently. But anyway, my Twitter is KKFLA737. Sometimes you'll get dragged into some strange arguments like that one.
It's got to be hard, though, to be a Barcelona fan right now because, I mean, they haven't played many games, right, this season because of coming off from the European competitions. They've seen a lot of players leave to go to clubs such as Wolves and other clubs. So people have been cherry-picking a lot of their players. Luis Suarez looks like he's on his way to Atletico Madrid, etc. So they've lost a lot of players. They've got some youth coming through the system. But this could be really, a transition year. This could be a wake-up call. And for a lot of Barcelona fans that are newer, that have been used to just scintillating years, scintillating football, it could mark a period where it's going to be a transition for a few years before they come back to anywhere close to the best, if at all anywhere near the best. And I mean, for all of us, I think, you know this, Kartik, a bunch of my cousins are mad Man United fans. I mean, the entire family are just hardcore. And this is a transition for them. Like the last few years, ever since Sir Alex Ferguson left the club, it's a completely different Man United, and it is one of the things that as soccer fans, there's no club that's always been at the very top. That's been through, has been at peaks. There's always peaks and valleys, and sometimes like troughs. The bottom of the barrel, but. I think that's part of being a football fan is that you appreciate the good times, but then also persevere for the bad times.
Yeah, I learned that with Liverpool fans when Torres went to Chelsea, and I thought it was a move upward at the time. I mean, the shtick I got for saying that, when I thought that was a very logical comment at that point in time. So yeah, I mean, particularly fans of big clubs when they face hard times, they don't adapt to it well, and I'm finding that with Barcelona fans. Anyway, so it's KKFLA737 is my Twitter handle.
And then one more thing before we go, Kartik, is I'll go first because I didn't give you a heads up about this. But what one match this weekend should listeners watch? One's like one that you would recommend that's a must see. That on paper sounds like it's going to be a good game. I mean, for me, this is pretty predictable, but I'm really intrigued by Arsenal to see what they're made of going against Liverpool on Monday. Arsenal so far have been really encouraging the way that they've been playing. They've seemed to have more discipline, more structure, really exciting, up front. And Liverpool has been a bit shaky. Definitely last weekend was better than the previous week. But hopefully Arsenal can really test Liverpool in this one. So that's my recommendation, Monday's 3:00 game, Liverpool against Arsenal. What about you?
Yeah, so that would have been mine. I think that's the most interesting because to me, Liverpool at this point look like they're further away from the rest of the Premier League than they were last year. And they won by 20 points or whatever last year. I actually am not like everyone else who thought that they struggled against Leeds. I think Leeds are very good. I think Leeds are a top 10 team, and they took every punch from Leeds and they still won. And then they went to Chelsea and played them off the park. So now there are some issues where Werner had to play on the left because Pulisic is hurt and Ziyech is hurt, and Lampard doesn't have confidence in Hudson-Odoi yet, which I think speaks pretty. He's the only out-and-out winger that's fit, and he didn't play. So there were various issues, and then obviously Christensen getting a red card, which I think has to do with the fact that Kepa's their keeper. If Caballero is their keeper, he probably doesn't make that mistake. It's a confidence thing with that back four, but still very impressed by Liverpool. But Arsenal have probably been the best team in England so far this season. And certainly when you include the Community Shield in that, and you think about the FA Cup final really kind of bleeding into this season, and it's the camaraderie, it's the way they're playing football, it's it's what Willian has given them. It's El Neni in the first match, and then he doesn't start in the second match, but they still look really good in midfield. So I'm intrigued by that. I will give you a bonus pick, though. I'm going to say Leverkusen and RB Leipzig. That's Saturday morning, 9:30 Eastern Time on ESPN+. Leverkusen were very, very good last season, but they've lost Kai Havertz. They've been very good the last few seasons. They lost Kai Havertz. They lost Kevin Volland. That's most of their goal scoring. RB Leipzig, want to see how they react as this season progresses. It just feels like they haven't made the sort of moves they need to keep up with Dortmund and Bayern, and that it'll be a 2-horse race in the Bundesliga. Last year it was very much a 3-horse race for much of the season until COVID. So I want to see how these two teams, which are in transition, that have lost players, and you mentioned Chelsea, the best player for Leverkusen, the best player for Leipzig, they both go to Chelsea. Chelsea buys both those guys. So 9:30 a.m. ESPN Plus on Saturday.
All right. So if you give a bonus, I'll give a bonus too. And that is at the same time on Saturday. It's 9:30 on ESPN Plus. And this is Augsburg against Dortmund. I was really impressed by Augsburg in the opening game last weekend, going to Union Berlin and getting the victory, looking really positive. I mean, in previous seasons with Augsburg, this seemed to be more of a kind of a defensive mindset, or not as well oiled or well skilled. But I was really impressed by their performance. So I think Dortmund will win this game, but it should be an exciting game between two teams that are really playing some good football. So that's my pick as a bonus for Saturday. All right, Kartik, heading into another weekend of football from around the world. What should they do?
Enjoy your football.